updates. Good morning, Tobago. Wake up with Kandace and Denise. Let's go.
Welcome back to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates. Well, viewers, you would have heard from the news in the space that we have some issues in terms of the payment of tuition fees for, students that are in Jamaica. That these are students that are on scholarship or accepting bursaries from the Tobago House of Assembly. And there's been a lot of talk, there's been a lot of criticism. And to answer some of those questions and more this morning, we have none other than Ms. Zorisha Hackett, the Secretary of Education, Innovation and Technology.
The Secretary of Education, Research and Technology.
Sorry, I just mixed up. I mixed it up
Good
between
morning, Kandace. Good morning, Tobago. Yes.
Yes.
A lot of critical issues to address this morning.
Certainly.
One correction, though, it's not only students on Mona campus, since UE Mona campus. It is students who have received financial assistance from the Tobago House of Assembly through the Department of Advanced Training and Advisory Services. So, they were very vocal about it. They were keeping in contact with me, and, I was very much on that scenario, but it's across the board. So, I just don't want us to isolate it to this particular academic institution. So let's just clarify that.
So what went wrong? We have the students right now complaining that they're not able to get the tuition fees, and as a result, they're not sure if they can even write final examinations. Their situation is in jeopardy.
We will address that part. As a Tobago House of Assembly, our Tobagonians fan, I come first.
Yes.
So that would be addressed, and we've been addressing issues like that as a Tobago House of Assembly even before this administration. Right. What went wrong is what has been going wrong in Tobago for a bit. There is a development budget, there's a recurrent. And I think a lot of persons are not aware of how it works. As it relates to these bursaries, grants, scholarships under that Department of Advanced Training and Advisory Services, it's allocated under the DP. All right, and the Division of Education, Research and Technology, of that 300 million, 33 million is allocated to the division. As you would appreciate, that 300 million is shared up amongst the divisions. And again, as you would appreciate, you don't get $33 million in your hand at the beginning of the fiscal, right? And so, just as my research says, from time to time, based on how it's allocated and how you actually are able to bring that money into your division, if it's not timely, then you have scenarios like this. But I also want to say that we've had an increase in students actually receiving these bursaries, scholarships, and grants. And again, coming out of COVID, we had so many students applying to go off to university because of the pandemic, opted to either defer, or of course, you just had to deal with tuition because you were actually using the online modality. And upon assuming this position, when we saw the number of students, who had applied, who had applied, and the point that so many of them were waiting to go back out. And by September of 2022, physical schools were reopening again. Then, of course, that increase had to be actually dealt with.
How much increase are we talking about? You said that there are more students than previous.
So you had a lot of students applying to go off to university, some opting to defer, some actually just dealing with tuition. And so, of course, if you're not paying for room, board, and tuition, or if that assistance isn't necessary at that point in time, then the financial allocation or what you're budgeting for is going to be less. And then, of course, most universities opened physical doors again in September 2022. But outside of that, the point at hand is scholarships, bursaries, grants, and the division's financial assistance commitment to these students. And the fact that these students have this contractual agreement with the division, and there's certain things they have to do and certain things we have to do as a division. And we've found ourselves in a position where that allocation not being, we don't have it in a timely manner, the way we're supposed to get it, then that's the scenario.
How much money is supposed to be going out to these students? What are we looking at?
Well, it depends. So right now it's $900,000. Thank you.
Yes.
Excuse me.
So $900,000, and this has been more than in previous
years. Yes, but by September it's going to be 1.9. So it varies. What's the commitment? How many students? What's the programs? If they're in the final semester, if they've just started. So the allocation changes. It's never, the same. However, at this point in time, 900,000. And as I said, not only to Mona,
Yes.
KFL, St. Augustine, St. George's, so it's across the board.
No.
At this point in time, as in to satisfy the outstanding.
No, if I
900,000.
understand the situation clearly, and based on some previous explanations that were given, there were some delays in terms of the budgetary release, the allocations that we receive at in the quarterly. There was a delay. Is this true?
So, and that's the thing, Kandace. It's not. You saw about a month or so ago the Division of Food Security, Natural Resources, the Environment and Sustainable Development had some challenges with their development workers as well. And so it's indicative of a larger issue. The fact that, and what we've been doing is doing a moving around that sooner or later it would have caught up with us, right? And when I'm saying caught up with us, you look at your priority, and every division does that. Okay, we're not getting it in this timely manner. We're not getting it en bloc as we're supposed to. So every month you're literally faced with what's the priority of that month.
Now, and I guess I want a little bit more clarity, because in the previous year, Mr. Gustin stated, our Chief Secretary stated that, they've been able to negotiate with the Minister of Finance for us to get those releases on block on time, so that we don't have these issues where we constantly have to shift around funds. So what's happening now?
Month to month. It's still month to month.
When did this start?
When did what start? Month to month?
The month to month. Was it always month to month?
We met it like this, Kandace.
And
that is inherently the issue.
So I'm trying to get the story right, because I mean, we had the Chief Secretary on several platforms saying that he was able to speak.
So last year, and they got probably like a 2-month advance. Yes. But I'm saying consistently as a Tobago House of Assembly.
So it has not been consistent.
No, it has not been. And so the modus operandi for the last how many years has been that month-to-month scenario. And when you get it month-to-month, as if you're in your home and you're trying to plan, if you have that finance in front of you, you can say, listen, these are the items I'm going to focus on for whatever period, right? But if you're getting the money piece, then obviously, whatever you have to do, you have to decide. It does not cater for all of my expenses. So let me see, is it that I'm going to deal with 50% of this here? Treat with what's, your priority. Treat with your outstanding and long-standing. It's that type of financial decision that occurs on a day-to-day basis in any division of the Tobago House of Assembly, not only isolated to the Division of Education.
As you mentioned priority, where is students' tuition on the priority list for the Division of Education?
Kandace, obviously, very high. I went to university without a cent, literally saved, hoped and prayed the Tobago House of Assembly would give me that assistance, did not get it. Spent a year in university with just relatives assisting me, and then applied for, I think the loan was a help loan, which I had to pay back immediately after. And you struggle through university. So, as I said, it's obviously high on our priority list. You have all these different areas you treat with under your DP, the school repair program. You deal with your, as I said, all these special projects, the projects, the remedial projects, the projects to assist with students coming up to speed after that fallout with the loss of contact hours, programs we wanted to deal with in terms of the multicultural aspect of school, PAN in schools, all these areas are under the DP. And so in any given year, you look at that money and you have your priority areas and you have the areas you want to be able to expand into, especially if after your strategic direction, you see we're hovering between 7 and 8 as an education zone. Let's do some projects or get into some programs that, would definitely speak more to literacy and numeracy. So you have different ideals based on your strategic direction, but there are particular items that remain constant. And financial assistance is one. It has been there. The department moved actually out of, I think, the Division of Finance at one point in time, or was it OCS? I'm trying to remember, but it's now under the purview of the division, and I think it's the best fit, obviously. And so you have this training awards committee that sits And actually, based on that strategic direction of the division and the areas we want to focus on as an island, because that's the next thing. You can't have every and anybody just applying to go off to university. You would want that. You want all your persons who are academically inclined, of course, to pursue education, tertiary education, but it's not sustainable, obviously. And so you would focus on the areas Tobago has as a part of its island's vision. Yeah? And so even after that, just because, in my opinion, I'm planning, and when I'm saying planning, I'm not only talking about as a Tobago House of Assembly, I'm talking about as a people planning to go off to tertiary. Most times, as you know, you worked and then you went and studied, right? You tried to get that experience before and then you went off. But now most students are opting to go straight off right after secondary school, right after A-levels.
But we understand, like I said, we understand the need for that. And,
so I'm telling you, so the priority is high, obviously high, but again, with limited financial resources. And the fact that I'm telling you, it's the Tobago House of Assembly with 33 million to the Division of Education, a division that's expanding, a division that's pushing all these different elements more into the space, and you're having persons more in tune with what they should pursue thereafter, then of course the interest is higher. You're having more persons applying, and again, more persons going straight off after secondary. And so that commitment increases, you know? So yeah, it's high. Listen, before we even had, and that's the thing, by the time it gets to the media, it's because it's something being treated. But this came as no surprise to me. I was keeping in close contact with students in that Mona campus, you know, keeping them abreast. For one or two of the students, it was not a case of the allocation being tardy. Students also have a commitment to maintain grades. Students also have a commitment to, in a very timely manner, send their documentation in. So for a few of them, it was on them. But I am not one to say that's the reason why. You know, we have students, St. Augustine, KFL, Jamaica, Grenada. You know what I mean? We have students across the United States. We have students across the globe studying. And if we have a commitment to them, it is my responsibility as secretary.
So what has been done? Division. I mean, has anything been done to relieve it?
So, again, before it got out there into the media, it was a work in progress. Unfortunately, because of the end of semester, it's crunch time. This is the final exam period. This is more or less as students are deciding if, you know, they're going to go and do a specialized program or not, if they're going to switch campus. Some students switch campus, students come closer to home, students go abroad, and so on. And so it's because of the critical nature. It's the end of semester too. However, this is something we've been dealing with most of the semester. And so, I mean, we're hearing the stories of those who are in trouble. But there are also those who, you know, obviously got that assistance. It would have been a larger outcry, of course. You have so many students abroad that the division is responsible for. And it's just unfortunate that in all the shifting and moving around, it did not happen in time, and now it's out there. And so, of course, as secretary, the responsibility is mine, and I understand that. And we were working very, very quickly on it. That $900,000, again, as I said, in the moving around, and you look in a division, and you know, that's how we operate on a day-to-day, you know.
Yes.
You literally cross-divisional collaboration. Secretary of Finance is also the chief secretary. He understands the fact that it's not perfect. It's not a perfect scenario where I can even write in my own division, find that money at any given point in time.
What about the contingency fund? Because we have the contingency fund set up for emergency, and yet, I mean, this situation could qualify for an emergency where, I mean, you need to pay this money so that our students can take a job because they are in a foreign country.
Candace, it didn't have to get to the contingency fund.
Okay.
It just needed that, as I said, it just needed that, listen, where immediately, we're having a challenge, where immediately we can, you know, do that reallocation. And so 900,000 immediately. But we already project that by September, it's going to be a 1.9 based on the applications we have inside and so on. And we usually don't have this challenge for September, you know, because you're coming to the end of the financial year, you know what you have, you're preparing for budget. But this second semester poses the most challenges. By this time, you're into mid-year review.
Yes.
You're seeing what you've spent, you're seeing what you have left back, and then again, coming out of such an extensive school repair program, as you would appreciate, $42 million, because of the issues we've had, long-standing issues, and the fact that we've been close to 2 years. That also, you know, pulled a lot from that DP. $33 million with a $42 million school repair. I mean, moving from calendar year to fiscal year, you can understand those challenges. So again, it's not a scenario that, we were not aware of, working very hard on it. The timing of it hitting the media and the timing of it being rectified, you may ask, it hit the media on Monday and it's rectified by Thursday. What does that mean? But that means that it was very, very apparent to us. We've been working behind the scenes with it. I've been in close communication with someone who more or less elected themselves as the voice of those students there in Jamaica, in KFIL, and in St. Augustine. They also have put representatives forward, and the close communication is there. Some students, based on the fact that they were not forthcoming with grades, and so we would have a 2-semester scenario to deal with. Some students, it's only the 2nd semester. Some students are getting ready to do some summer. So we are treating with that. And so it's unique to every student. But the point is, we are responsible for that our end of the contractual agreement, and I wish to honor it. What I would also be able to do is to provide an update with when that's actually there in the space. But as I said, 900,000 is the figure. Right now, based on everything else that has happened within the last week or two, it's now only 900,000 outstanding.
All of that money has been paid. There's no longer that issue. There's no longer that issue of, students needing that money right now. They are in a comfortable position.
No, you can't say there's no longer until the actual university gets wired the money, which is happening right now.
Okay, so the wire is going out now.
Until the actual university gets the money, I am not going to say, saying that the money is allocated and saying that we sent off the money and saying that the university receives it and the student, So I want to be comfortable enough to say, Kandace, every student at this point, if it's tomorrow, I'm saying that. If it's Friday, I'm saying it. But the process has begun. As I said, the warrant came to the division yesterday, actually. Accounting staff, AE2 worked overtime yesterday. Data sent up all the files. We even looked at those to come for summer, looked at what we had to do, because we always do that. Let's look at what happens, projections for September. That always happens. But this particular circumstance, as I said, in the moving around and moving. Okay, we have contractors to pay. So you wait, you're not priority. Now we have these grants, bursaries, and scholarships to deal with. Contractors, let's wait a bit with you. And it's more or less a domino effect and a moving around because you don't get the money on block. That's basically it.
Now, is the Executive Council, as a member of the Executive Council, is the Executive Council looking at a plan to sort of alleviate these challenges? So
yes, we are. And I'm actually going to allow the Chief Secretary to make that announcement. We have several conversations to have in this space. And I actually think we've been too quiet as an executive as it relates to dealing with the issues with the allocation afforded to us. We have this DRC agreement. We made this as a focal point. As a government, as a Tobago Island government, the fact that, we've been receiving on the lower end of the scale. And when you look at the proportion of recurrent to DP, it has always been a challenge, 300 million, And I've been seeing those projections in the space about, but you build this for that and you build this. Every division has an allocation and you make the plans according to your division's allocation. I think in the Tobago House of Assembly, probably we're 3rd on the list in terms of largest DP, the Division of Education. And you deal with what you have in front of you. And then as you're moving in the year, you make those shifts around, right? That's money management. You make the shifts around, but you always have your priority. The thing about it is you're having an expanding island. You're having an expanding THA, and the resources remain the same. I mean, think about it. If you're expanding, it's just like your home. The cost of living is increasing. If your salary doesn't change, then obviously you're going to have to make some cuts. You always make that priority, and then you make decisions. I'm going to do this year, but I'm going to do this next year. But I'm going to, hold back from this. It's not as important. And so it's more or less just budgeting.
There's a criticism that, this administration has been able to find money to, whether it is to go off on trips or to fund some things that the public might not consider as priority. But yet when it comes to things like students' tuition or salary payments, it ends up in a situation, sometimes it ends up in a situation where the money is not available at that point in time, and then we're forced to come to the public and say, you know, hold on a little bit because we're waiting on the release of funds to deal with it.
Okay.
So how do you treat with that criticism?
So the reality is, Kandace, as with everything else, going off on a trip doesn't mean that the Tobago House of Assembly takes a $38,000 or $40,000 and literally pays you, the travel agent, or that's not how it works. POs, invoices, that's how the THA does business. So the going off on trips, I mean, if you're a serious government, you understand. I haven't seen any of my colleagues go on a vacation or go on a trip where they're lying on, you know, the beach, sipping a pina colada. These trips, just as the central government, are essential for development. As a matter of fact, if you're really serious about governance, you would understand what that exposure does. What I'm thinking is happening in the last 2 or 3 years or so, because of the pandemic, we've not seen overseas travel. And the place is opening back up. But when you look every 2 or 3 days, I'm seeing ministers on trips. You know, as a matter of fact, I am supposed to be going to the UN with the Secretary of Community Development and ministers to advocate on some new policies, and this is just a part of governance. You have a government where your officials aren't taking trips and networking and presenting on these global platforms, then you're obviously not in governance on a global level, and you have to understand that critical need for that type of exposure, that type of networking, and you know, so I think, you know, trying to obviously put those things together as if it's not a part of governance and almost as if you're doing this on account of that, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. The issues we're facing with is the budgetary allocation, and that doesn't mean that because you have those issues that you just shut down governance and, you know, priority is always it. There are trips I actually refuse to go on. There are trips I refuse, and again, you prioritize. I refuse to go on this trip because I can probably send another technocrat where the overall cost is going to be less, or I can liaise with a minister thereafter and get the information. But if there's a trip where Tobago has to show up and show out, I'm definitely going to be there. And I think that that should be the way we see governance, right? So trips, I'm trying to figure out what else, you know, we've made priority. But what I think happens is people look at the divisions, and you may see a project happening in one, but another division having an issue, and then you're saying, but you could have money to build a stage in the sea, but you can't have. You understand what I'm saying?
But I mean, there's a difference also between developmental expenditure.
Right, I was going to get to that. What I think we also need to do as a Tobago House of Assembly is explain the allocation. Explain what happens on the recurrent side, and explain what happens on the capital development side. Explain, listen, these are your bills on the recurrent, these salaries, you know, paying for the buildings that we rent, just treating with the day-to-day expenses. And the DP, those projects, those, you know what I mean? Those plans to progress the island. And I think people, even with the way the projects are done in infrastructure, the design, build, finance, you're hearing the 300 million is done already, and that's why, you know what I mean? And I think we need to educate the public. And I think if we educate the public so they can know, listen, design, build, finance means you build the plan, you come up with the plan, you build, and we almost on terms. So we may have to go into layman terms. So you would deal with courts or standards. I pay you.
Higher purchase arrangements.
Yes. And so doing that can happen while the Division of Education focuses on what they have to focus on. What I would have to do, and what I've been doing as secretary, and that's the thing, you have so many ideas. You come into this job, so many ideas, and you have to shelve some of these ideas because the financial reality is just not forthcoming for you to push forward with those ideas. And again, education and pursuing higher education is priority. And if we're at this stage where a priority item, you know, is falling into a scenario where you have students crying out, and rightly so, then that just speaks to the larger issue at play. If they're prioritizing and even the priority has a challenge. But I am going to implore my colleagues for us to engage on an education campaign. And not one where, you know, we're using the jargon that the man on the street is not in tune with. I think we really need to, in layman terms, explain.
Now,
break it down.
Is tuition under the recurrent parts of the budget or development?
So what the Training Awards Committee pulled together under the Department of Advanced Training and Advisory Services is So the allocate. So we can't just say tuition in a broad basis because we can speak to what happens in primary, secondary,
Certainly.
right? So, but I'm talking about scholarships, bursaries, and grants, DP. As a matter of fact, when I became secretary and I heard of that, I was kind of surprised because in my mind, I'm thinking, this is something we're committed to. It's almost like a bill we pay. But then after thinking about it and understanding how the budget works, I understand why it's there. And if you notice, we always have, we've had salary payments and so on the recurrent end, but we have so many challenges on the DP side. As I said before, Secretary Pantin had to treat with that recently. And, when I saw that happening, I was like, when there's smoke, when you're seeing smoke, prepare for fire, because if it started showing up there, then obviously the moving around, you run out of moves after a point in time, And so I really tried to deal with it. We made some strides in some areas. As I said, it's all of the Tobago students abroad. This is one university, one cohort reaching out, but it's not only them. I wanted to say that. It's not only Mona, it's everywhere. But we've been dealing with it campus by campus as we're moving around. And then it just came out there before, treating with it. It's nothing to hide. It's a reality. The Tobago public needs to understand that as an administration, we came in almost $1 million in debt. I was telling the chief secretary how embarrassed I was. I went to a forum in Trinidad and took a PO, and the hotel was telling me, get your credit card out, you're blacklisted there. So we have those challenges. That's the reality. But we need to be vocal about it some more. I think that I've been doing it all the time. I've been letting people know that's the reality, But I've also sent my training awards committee on a mission. And, they have to get back to me by a particular period. That mission is based on research, because we've done it before, but I think you have to keep doing it, especially post-COVID. What are the areas we have a dirt in terms of expertise, technocracy, in terms of where we need those persons to come back? Because we have brain drain, it's a reality.
Yes.
And we also have persons pursuing careers and, trying to come back to fit into the Tobago space. And there's just no room for them. And there's a mismatch in terms of how many persons are going out there, getting that tertiary education and coming back and not getting value for money in terms of, what you actually earn after that investment. And so that is their task, to embark on that research process. Let's see what we need as an island. And let's actually have a tier system of how we allocate those financial assistance resources. We can't have 100 persons studying business management, but we want a forensic pathologist in the space, or coastal engineer, or marine biologist, because that's the direction we want to pursue.
But if we're looking at some of those career options, for instance, let's take marine biology, marine sciences, and it's actually wider than just simple going and studying the corals.
Of course.
But when you look at the school system doesn't allow us as students to be able to go into the water and to explore and learn and be exposed. It's one of the challenges that, for instance, Mr. Alvin Douglas has spoken many times about.
And Kandace, let me tell you, and that is why I said you come into this, and I'm not lamenting it, it's just the reality. I've learned to accept the reality and learn to work around it. You come into this seeing the flaws, the gaps. And again, if I don't know what the thing is, I may not even pursue it. So promoting it is a challenge. And so you're thinking, okay, I'm looking at the end point, but how do I get there? What do I need to do in the early childhood care and education system to open the minds of my students?
Yes.
To get them excited and not the typical, I want to be a fireman, I want to, what else is out there? And again, you would appreciate moving out of COVID. You've seen how digital media, social media, how these platforms have created employment and different careers where you literally, once you can present, use your voice well, you have that creativity, you're able to manage a platform on your own. So it's not just the traditional areas. To move from the early childhood to the primary and have students again exposed to that, not traditional jobs and careers. And then again, from there to secondary school, you just said it. We have reefs here on the island, but do we allow our students or fourth form or fifth form students to actually study, what's happening with the corals while they're being bleached? Why, our persons are not appreciating them? what's going on with species on the reef and all of that. You don't have that. And then you want them to be a marine biologist without the exposure. And so when you look at even taking it there, you need to make some investment. And in making that investment, you create, you know, the plan you want or the vision you have for the island. That requires money. And you may start a really exciting project like that. You work the budget out and so on. And halfway in, you realize that, listen, because the allocation did not increase, you started that, and now you're running out of money to pay your teachers their gratuity or their increments. And again, that gratuity increments as a scenario is, you know, not something that I'm coming on in the last year, this is what I'm owed. You have years of gratuity and increments, for example, piled up there, and you're trying to treat with that while treating with your students abroad, while treating with your contractors who are actually, you know, dealing with restoring your plants or H plants across the island, dealing with the school feeding program, dealing with your maxi taxi drivers that are literally taking your children to and fro at any given point in time, with just the $8 million increase between, you know, the last administration and this one based on a budgetary allocation with larger responsibility. So, Kandace, it's just about money management.
And we're going to get into a bit more about that money management and in terms of the plans for developing education. But we're just going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Okay.
Let's go, go. It's a brand new morning. Yeah. Hey. Tobago updates. Na, 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 na. Good morning, Tobago. Na, na, na.
Welcome to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Update. So, on viewers, we are continuing our conversation with the Secretary of Education, Research and Technology, Zorisha Hackett, in terms of just some developments in the area of education, especially for Tobago. Now, coming out of the crime symposium yesterday, CARICOM Crime Symposium, where, you know, our heads around the region were looking at how are we treating with crime as a public health issue. And quite a lot of the conversation yesterday centered around education, especially where our children is concerned. Now, there's, of course, a responsibility of the parents to ensure that, you know, they raise their children right and so on. But there is a gap, there are issues, there are social issues that we need to deal with, and they come into the school system. We just came out of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we are yet to really understand the implications of that on our students. Are we really setting up? Are we taking a serious look or preparing in a serious way for those consequences after to make sure that, you know, we can treat with them when they show up among our students? I mean, they already are showing up, but I mean, the data is out there that it can get worse.
One of the most important departments in the Division of Education for me right now is that department, well, that unit, student support services. We have a student support services with our psychiatrists, our counselors, guidance officers, and so on. And I have actually, you know, given them that mandate that you have a major role to play coming out of the pandemic. We've always seen that decline, right? The moral fabric decline and the societal decay happening outside. And to me, it has really increased post-COVID. You know, that lack of social interaction did something to our students. The fact that they were home on a different platform, a lot of them trying to fit in and blend in and come to terms with parents still having to struggle to, you know, to make ends meet, and probably a grandparent or extended family jumping in to do that supervision and so on. And we saw a lot of that pent-up frustration and even anger, confusion, and so on, coming out with all that school violence we had right as we opened doors last year at the third term. And as a division, we also saw, of course, with the poor results of the SEA and the fact that, you know, the O and A levels, you know what, was not where they needed to be. They were not where they needed to be, sorry. And I looked at it like, you know, these students, if we don't arrest it there and arrest it even in the earlier stages, that's, you know, an idea of what society looks like later on. And every time you hear crime, you know, it goes right back to the home, and it also, you know, overflows into what happens in the education system. And so, yes, education takes center stage, in my opinion, whether it's formal or the informal education system, takes center stage in any conversation you're having with treating with crime. I had a conversation with we've been having some conversations, Minister of Education. And once you're speaking to anything to do with your societal development and so on, you have to have those cross-ministerial or cross-divisional conversations. It cannot be done alone in silos. You literally have to think about how do you get to this place? And how do you get to this place needs different facets, different modalities, and different strategies to be able to arrest this issue. In the Division of Education, we have been looking at the ongoing issues of literacy and numeracy, and the fact that we try to do these corrective measures and employ them later on, as opposed to the diagnosis and understanding that at this level, we need to treat with those issues. And we've been matriculating students up and out. You do your SCA, parent probably isn't satisfied, or somebody makes that isolated decision, you get held back. But you get held back, but what really happens in that extra year? Then you move on into the secondary school system. You struggle your way through because it's a prescribed curriculum, and you fall into that curriculum. If it didn't work out for you, go and learn a trade type of mindset. And so for that mindset to be shifted, you have to make a major investment. As a government, you have to make a major investment. If I'm bringing it home, as a Tobago House of Assembly and even in the division.
One of the things that also came out from yesterday, especially, was the technocrats stated that, a lot of these things need to be, as you also mentioned, nipped in the bud early, when this is why early childhood care is extremely important. How are we making sure that our students, our children, are accessing all of them? Are accessing early childhood care? Because I think it might have been either Barbados or Jamaica reported that they actually saw some success in some of their programs when they got the children in at that level, in terms of, turning around some of their situation. No matter what their home life was, it was able to be turned around, because, especially when it comes to violence, because we have crime, but we also need, as a Caribbean, we're also treating with violence, and it seems to be getting worse. So how are we making sure that all our children in Tobago get into that early childhood care structure, and not just in the early childhood care structure, but also being able to be taught the right things?
Right. So let me go back to student support services. I have actually charged student support services, just as the other units in the Department of Education, with that cross-unit collaboration. You have the early childhood care, primary, secondary. And you have challenges where a student, because in my opinion, when you look at these first world countries, they start education a bit later on. They focus on socialization. And that is because they want to look at the students' interaction outside of the home environment. And you're able to pick up on these social elements. You're able to really look, this is an introvert, it's an extrovert. This person, mind works in this particular way. This person is more creative with their hands. And you look at the different learning styles and different intelligences, and you're able to determine, And after that stage, they get into the primary school. But I think that that transference of what was observed isn't really there. Right? And that movement from one level to the next, and that interconnectivity, and the fact that you should have that really immersive methodology of understanding. The child that left me at 4.5 in whatever preschool had these challenges. And now you're taking them up in this primary school. And so I want you to focus on that with this child. But you have a scenario where you're learning over the child, right? And the child comes in, probably with some issues at home, probably single parent, and so on. But, I never really look at those home scenarios as the be-all and the end-all with children. I've seen children come from homes, both parents, and I've seen children. So that shows you how important the schooling is, right? We have to look at several issues when we look at that. We look at class size. We look at teachers being trained to observe, but not to diagnose. I don't think that's their role. But this unit that I'm talking about, a major investment needs to be made in them, because you need to be able to, we don't have the luxury of every child having this opportunity to sit in front of someone and right? But you must have that facility that if you're identifying a challenge, that they have that interaction with the diagnosis, and not just by anybody who isn't trained to say, I think your child have ADHD, or I think, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a robust system that is committed to assisting with that area so the intervention happens early. And the intervention isn't a one-off intervention where if you move from one academic institution to the other, you start over, you're lost in the system again. So I'm talking about continuous assessment and intervention that treats with these issues. And we've had conversations with our school administrators. We've had conversations. We literally brought the entire unit together, and we've had these real conversations with principals, and that's the cry. You may have a guidance officer, but one guidance officer with 800 students in a school.
Certainly not enough.
Or a guidance officer whose expertise may be in this area, but not in this area, or who has a passion for something, but not given the resources to get it done. And it's the reality, you know? And when you have students who, and I as a teacher, I saw it, the students who give the most trouble, most times it's attention. They're lacking simple attention. And those are the students I used to reach out to most, because you have an opportunity to, you're not trained for it, but you have an opportunity to transform a life. And most times that student, make them a group leader, or make that student responsible for coming up with the end of term project. Give them a responsibility on a daily basis. And you see a total turnaround because the attention does something for you. Most times, the home doesn't give them that, right? And the bully or the student who is very introverted, because those are two opposite behaviors, you're going to get that. You know, you're going to get, if you research, if you do the background check and so on, you're going to get that.
But what about it also in terms of socialization?
Yes.
Because, I mean, it becomes even more of an issue now coming out of the pandemic.
You're
and
correct.
we're realizing that a lot of our children are growing up, they're not learning how to socialize properly. And a lot of times they end up turning to violence to express their emotions. And that's why we're seeing some of the school fights that are coming out.
Yeah.
So then how are we treating with that part?
Again, so... That's a difficult conversation to get into, because I look at my two children, and personalities have a lot to do with it. Personalities definitely have a lot to do with it. But I think as parents, we ourselves have to instill that confidence in our children and have them understand their value and their worth. Some students, especially in the teenage years, you know what happens there. But some students go out looking for that.
Yes.
And you look for it, look for clique, friends, you look for some activities to get into, and so on. As a school system, a lot of our teachers feel overwhelmed because, you know, you have 30, 40 students in front of you, different personalities, different home environments, all coming to you for you to impart knowledge, but you're more than that in a classroom at any given point in time. And so again, post-COVID, the lack of socialization really did something to our children. And now the phone, right, the devices, they have become that outlet, right? You're having communication less verbally and more utilizing the devices. And you're also having a scenario where students are lashing out, because they're craving something. Something is deficient, they're craving it. And now I am really, really worried about the extent it's even having on our teachers, trying to get into their minds now to bring them back from that period where there was that absence of interaction. Behind a screen, you're face-to-face again with me. You're in the class. Everybody excelled or advanced at different levels. I'm trying to arrest you all in the classroom at the same time. Try to bring up to speed those that were lagging behind. Those who had those social issues, you still have them, or they've worsened over that period, all while trying to deliver the curriculum. You understand? And so again, as I spoke earlier, you as secretary and your technocrats behind you may come up with some intervention strategies that needs major investment. Right? And that major investment may mean you train more persons, you get projects and initiatives geared towards getting the students out of just that blackboard classroom type scenario, having students interact more, use their brains more, speak out more, be more responsible, get into positions of authority, embark upon projects that are different, that have their minds working, and just change the regular way we've done things. And when you look at these first world countries and how they've been doing it, they've actually, coming out of the COVID, allowed students flipped classroom sessions, allowed students to take charge, because administrators, teachers, and instructors are now looking at, let me see where you're at, instead of me trying to play catch up with what we've missed out on. And I think we've focused so much on the loss of contact hours and the learning loss, and we've not looked at how much was gained in that period. You know, how much of our students, how much were they able to introspect and learn about themselves in that 2 down years. And now that they're coming back out into that, back to face-to-face modality, how can we now learn them over and give them the opportunities to express themselves and guide the way the curriculum. And I'm not talking about stemming away from it in a way where you're not, because at the end of the day, our system sets it up where there's an exam to be done. But I'm speaking about giving them more autonomy in the classroom and having them able to actually pull their colleagues together. Miss, we're learning it this way, but while we were off, you know, that face-to-face engagement, we learned to cope with it this way. And let's not just switch back there. So the technology still needs to be a part of it. Teachers probably need to find more interactive ways of having conversations again, engaging in teamwork and group assignments. And again, that flipped classroom scenario is one that allows the students to take charge, and the teacher can now fall back and say, you know, this student used to be more vocal. I'm not seeing that now, so let me, or this student was less vocal, you know, and observe. And I think the classroom needs to be one of more observation, not just the coming in and you have a, you know, a syllabus to impart and you have 2 periods to get that done. More observation. But the division, and I'm speaking localized now, the division has to bring that support to the teachers.
Where are we in bringing that structure and, you know, bringing in some of those programs or those initiatives just to help, I mean, of course, not just the students, but the teachers as well.
So I must boast, the division invests in teacher training. We do. We had a principals conference. It was the day after International Women's Day. I'm trying to remember what day that was. We have these all the time. We invest in our teachers. Is it enough? It could never be. It could never be. But I actually feel proud about that. And teachers are actually given that opportunity to see. We'll never, ever be able to give everything we need to give. We know the resources, you know, they're not infinite. And so that's always going to be a challenge. But I think that more support can be given. I definitely think that more resources need to be allocated, and I think the conversations need to continue as to what we really want. But again, you have the larger vision, and you're looking at all the stepping stones to get there, and money is the key denominator. Money is, you know what I mean? You need to. But I also think exposure. We have principals going on a conference in Barbados very soon. And whenever we have these opportunities for the exposure to be had, I am the largest advocate, the biggest advocate for it, because I want us to be able to understand that as an island, we don't have to be myopic in our thinking.
Yes.
And we always speak to the Finland and the Singapore and so on, but they started somewhere and they made an investment. And the investment was one where, again, you understood from a national perspective the priority. Not only education, I would always bat for education, but all these areas and the interplay between them. Yeah? And so I have that commitment, and I'm maintaining that commitment into our teacher training, into that resources, that element of resource management, and also the fact that you prioritize. The larger projects, they won't all get off the ground at the same time. And I've been learning to accept that, and I've been learning of the value of the smaller projects too, leading up to the grander scheme. Right. I've also looked at the fact that you wouldn't get everything done in one day, right? And you have to prioritize all of that while still ensuring that your gratuity, your increments, and your schools are maintained and all of that. But prioritizing is the word of the day.
All right, and I guess that's how we're going to have to leave things because we are out of time this morning.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you an update with the payments to the tertiary institutions. Yes, you're going to get an update.
All right, great.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, Secretary Hackett, for being on with us and for spending the time and getting into some very important conversations
in
this space. All right, viewers, so that's it for the show this morning. Thank you for viewing and have a safe and wonderful and productive day. And we'll see you again tomorrow.
I say thanks for favor to wake up and hear me neighbor. 60,000 people strong.